Welcome back to another episode of Better Call Sexton. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all those wonderful things that help the channel. We got a heavy docket for you today. We got rush talk. Some people losing thousands, some making millions. We've got back to school and how it affects children. We've got estranged parents. Women get a higher wage also equals a higher divorce rate. We have a viewer submission and of course your daily Sexton-ism. Let's get after it.
So for this story here, rush talk. Do you know anything about rush talk? Are you aware?
I for what you're telling me right now, no. I know the band Rush. I know they have the songs Tom Sawyer. One of my favorites, Free Will, is a great one. Other than that, no, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, so this time of year,
I really avoid TikTok like I avoid a proctologist's office because it's a similar feeling.
So this happens every year. This has been going on since I want to say like 2021. Rush talk.
All the way back to 2021. God, I was so young then.
Hey, on the internet, that's a long time.
That's
a
long time. On the internet, a week is a long time.
Yeah, it's basically a decade. So
it is.
Rush talk, around this time of year, you might know in the South, you know, the southern states of America.
Oh, fraternities and sororities.
Fraternities and sororities are big.
Yes, got it.
So
I was in a fraternity. I am in a fraternity, technically, Alpha Phi Delta, Gamma Pi chapter.
So every year, this happens. It's honestly an organic thing. Every year, some beautiful Southern belle blonde goes viral, and she documents her story from rushing to getting in the sorority. And now this has kind of become a codified thing. So we have some articles here. Parents are paying consultants thousands of dollars to get their kids into a sorority. Families are paying for rush coaches.
Let me tell you something. Pets and kids, you can never go wrong investing in this. Really, pets and kids, people will spend no limit of money on their pets and on their kids. Trust me, I see people's financial spreadsheets all the time in connection with divorces, and I am shocked at the amount of money that people spend on their kids. Pets, not so much. I think they're worth every penny. Kids, questionably so.
Ballpark, which one do you think you spent more money on? The kids or the pets?
Kids, you fucking kids were expensive. My God, you are much more expensive.
And we still are. But going back to the article.
Dogs would have been such a better investment, but go ahead. Sorry. They don't know how to do video editing, so I'm stuck.
So families are paying for rush coaches to help script video applications, polish Instagram feeds to be more appealing, and manage the emotions of sorority hopefuls. Some parents are saying, it's a cultural thing. I was in the sorority. I got to make sure my daughter gets in.
A legacy.
Some are saying, especially for fraternities, that it's a networking thing, that in this job market, you got to know somebody to get a good job. So they're saying, I got to get my kid in this fraternity. He can network.
Mostly what I got professionally out of being in a fraternity is a lot of people who call me from across the United States claiming to be my brother and asking for free legal advice. I get a lot of that, but I don't think anybody really gave me a leg up in the process. Sorry, guys.
So obviously us coastal New York elites, you know, we can't talk too much about the dirty South, good old, but I would love to know, maybe you have some experience with this. Maybe you have some take on this, on just sort of sorority craze. I mean,
it's funny that you're bringing this up because I actually just had an argument last week with a client and on behalf of a client with opposing counsel about whether or not a college expense, which is defined as the expenses necessary for a child to attend undergraduate college, would include sorority or fraternity dues. Because fraternity and sorority dues can actually be very, very high. The costs associated with maintaining good standing in a fraternity or sorority can be very high. And it's not technically a necessary college expense. And people argue all the time in divorces about what allocation people should have of these expenses, especially non-necessary expenses like that. But look, I'm not surprised that this sub-economy has popped up. You know, it's just like the college admissions scandal that claimed, you know, part of Full House a few years ago. The reality is that people will spend money on giving their children what they perceive to be a leg up. Is some of this really people just living out their own stuff through their children? I think so. I think a lot of parents fall into this fallacy of seeing their children's success as some indicator of their own success, or their children's failure, quote unquote failure, as some indication of their own personal failings. I think people live vicariously through their children a tremendous amount. I never got bit by that bug. I saw my children's successes as partly something I contributed to, but there's a lot of organic material that I have no control over that that had an impact on that. And similarly, if you believe the good reviews, you got to believe the bad ones. So if you're going to claim ownership of their victories, you also have to claim ownership of their defeats. And parents who are afraid of that are going to definitely overly invest in these kinds of things. And it's very easy to say, where you went to college is incredibly important, and what fraternity or sorority you were in at that college is incredibly important. Personally, I don't buy into this stuff. I just don't buy into this stuff. Some people think the car you drive is an indicator of how much wealth you have. I drive a Jeep Wrangler Rubicon. It's not the nicest car. It's a great car. I love it. I wouldn't want to drive anything else. I could afford to drive any car I wanted to drive. That's the car that I choose to drive. So if you're trying to decide my success financially based on my vehicle, you're going to be sorely mistaken. I have plenty of clients that own entire collections of supercars that are completely broke. It's the same thing with this. Where a person went to school, can it give you some leg up in some settings? I'm sure that it can, but I never bought into that whole college dynamic thing. I went to a state college. I went to a fairly crappy at the time state college, and it hasn't held me back any. Sorry, folks. And I went to an excellent law school. I went to Fordham University School of Law, that at the time was a top tier law school. I don't follow the rankings to know if it's still up there. But I remember at my orientation sitting next to a gentleman who was incoming, just like me, 1L, first year law student. And he said to me, where did you go to college? And I told him I went to Ramapo College of New Jersey. And he said, I've never heard of it. And I said, where did you go to college? And he said, well, I went to Columbia University. And I said, well, isn't that funny? We both, are sitting in the exact same room, going to the exact same law school. And his college education, one semester of it cost more than my entire college education. So I'm not shitting on Columbia University. It's a fine institution. But to think that just because you get into a particular school, get into a particular fraternity or sorority, that you're given a leg up in life, I think that's a very, very poor investment.
So part of this story, I'm gonna send you a reel here. So
oh boy.
The reason why a lot of girls are going into this is that some have leveraged Rush Talk into meaningful influencer careers.
Into OF careers. Oh, sorry. Into influencer careers. That's what you meant to say. Sorry.
So this one's actually quite wholesome. So we have, back in one of the earliest Rush Talk sort of seasons, talk about a Southern name, Kylan Darnell, wow. Alabama student.
You could make that up. Alabama. Okay.
I'll send you a reel. Very, very pretty. So she was an absolute darling of Rush Talk, and now she's working with ESPN.
Boom goes the dynamite. All right, let's check it out.
So we'll take a look.
Come to ESPN's College Game Day with
Beautiful.
me.
So I'd have another game to win.
She looks like she'd go to Alabama. All right. Good for her. But look, here's the thing. Obviously, the influencer, the TikTok thing or the Reels thing got her noticed, but the fact that she's a very pretty young woman and probably charismatic and not, she has a level of confidence that enables her to be in front of a camera like that, those are kind of innate traits. I think if she'd gone to a different school, if she'd found some other way to put herself out into the public purview, she probably would have had a similar result, but good for her. She certainly leveraged it into something. Again, is it a career path? It's possible that if by playing music on the subway with your guitar, you might get discovered by someone. I have a friend who is a very successful model and actor who started out because he just got noticed by a Calvin Klein scout, essentially, on a subway. And the person said to him, hey, you have a great look. Have you ever done any modeling? Does that mean you should, as a plan, ride the subway more often because you want to get discovered as a model? I don't think that's a great business model. And certainly if someone had said, hey, I want to invest in teaching this person how they can be spotted on the subway, I don't know that that would be a useful investment of time and expense. So again, sometimes you're just going to step in shit and come out with a fertilizer contract. It sounds like this is a charming, confident, beautiful young woman by any metric. And she, used her public influence and her ability to be seen in this moment. But again, by the time these things get discovered as a way to become in the public eye, everybody discovers them. How many young women are probably looking at that video and going, well, it worked for her. I bet it'll work for me. And then you have a marketplace that's absolutely flooded with these Rush Talk videos or these, influencer things. I mean, look, the early adopting influencers were the ones who absolutely walked out with bank. But is it as easy to do that now? If this show had been on 10 years ago, I would be swimming in money right now. And so the truth is, it's harder in a marketplace where there's a lot of people trying to colonize every moment moment of your attention and every moment of your day. There's a lot more people competing for that space. And if everybody's trying to be the same person and get the same jobs on ESPN, there's only so many of those jobs to go around.
So I imagine people would love to know, in your experience, being a divorce lawyer, being an attorney, influencers.
Yeah.
Have you worked with them? What is that like? The male influencers, the female influencers, what is that game like?
Yeah, I've done a couple of them. I mean, I did their precursors before the internet. I did models and actors, and that's very similar. People that are used to having people be really, really nice to them and agree with almost everything they say and give them a little more credit than is necessarily due. But yeah, I've done some influencer divorces. I don't know if any of them are public record that I can comment on the specifics, although if you Google it, you might find a few. But yeah, I've done a few of them. What I will tell you is some of the ones that I've done, the amount of money that the person claims they have to sell their coaching courses or to sell their status as an influencer is not an indication of the amount of money they actually have. And what I'll also say is, for those of you out there that are influencers, you might want to pay attention for this one. Just come in a little bit close. We'll talk just the two of us, attorney-client privilege. If you're going to go to court and claim you don't actually make any money, do not post pictures of yourself on Instagram getting on private jets and buying your girlfriend things from Hermes when you know you have pending child support proceedings in which you're going to say you only make $100,000 a year. It's not going to help your argument. Anything you say on social media can and will be used against you in a court of law by a person like me who has summer interns in their 20s who like nothing more than to spend the entire day in an air-conditioned office getting paid to look at TikTok and find evidence against you. Public service announcement over.
So on the topic of schools, we have a very interesting article here from Credit Karma. If anybody has financial, information, to be Credit Karma. Not sponsored, though.
Not sponsored. Not yet. Credit Karma, hit me up.
Back to school 2025, financial stress, tariff worries, and Labubu dolls. We have some stats here. Over a third, 39% of surveyed parents with at least one child attending school this upcoming year report they're unable to afford back to school shopping. 44% plan to take on debt. This is up from 34% just last year. People want to know, back to school, what is that like on your clients' finances, on their mental, on their emotional? I mean, what does that look like?
It's a tough one. Look, it's hard to cut something in half and have it be bigger than it was before. So a lot of people, when they're going through divorce, they're experiencing tremendous economic strain. I don't represent as many of those people anymore. I tend to represent higher net worth clients. But for the average person, even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I represented more middle class people, when you're bleeding money on lawyers and experts and court fees and getting a new apartment or a new house so that the two of you are physically separated, it's hard to then be able to get your kids everything that they wanted. Also, the cost of things to send children back to school has gone up exponentially. It used to be a pack of number 2 pencils, some pens, some colored crayons. You get the big box or the little box, the one that has the sharpener in it. Now it's iPads. Now it's a much larger number of items that children are expected to have in order to sort of deal with the evolving technology that, of course, we want to give to children. And you can use the school-owned products and iPads and things, but generally they're not going to be as high of a quality. There's going to be some lag time because most schools, unless they're private schools, which again create their own problems, we have a ton of people arguing about private school tuition and children that were going to private school, and now that the parents are divorcing, they're not able to go to private school anymore because that money is just not there for $70,000 a year tuition in New York City for these children to go to school when they're in first grade and learning basic math, and you're spending the amount of a private college tuition on it. So look, I think that when in difficult economic times, these are the kinds of things that the kind of painful choices that people need to make. And what you should realize and take some comfort in is that all of the people that invented these technologies, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, all those people, they were all educated using paper and pencils and yellow pads and chalkboards. So I wonder how they got so smart. It is not the technology and the school supplies that you have. It's the quality of teaching. It's the quality of education. It's the quality of the home environment in which children are encouraged to learn and love learning. So these are all things that you can give to your children that money can't buy for you. But yeah, my heart breaks for people that can't provide for their children in the ways that they'd like to. I think that's one of the most painful experiences a person can have. Starting out in my career, I came from no money and I had very little money, and there were a lot of things I wanted my kids to be able to have when they were little that I could not provide to them. And there is nothing more helpless feeling-wise in the world, other than maybe when your kids are sick, than feeling like you can't provide for them. And that causes tremendous economic strain and stress on people, which affects marriages and increases the divorce rate.
I think you did all right.
Thanks.
I think it worked
appreciate
out.
that.
I got a room.
Well, the best thing is making your kid not realize that you're broke.
That's true. I got to eat a bunch of ramen. I got a RuneScape membership.
A lot of ramen. Yep, you got a RuneScape. Yeah, we found ways to make you feel like you weren't as poor as you were.
So we have here from Financial Times, we have married women were more than twice as likely as their male counterparts to get divorced within 3 years after becoming chief executives, receiving promotions, receiving pay grades, status upgrades.
Oh, yeah.
What are we thinking? Have you seen this? Is this something that you see in your experience?
So, yes, I've seen it a lot as a divorce lawyer. The explanations as to why this happens, I would defer to more intelligent people who have focused their study on this. I think Mike Sartain talks about this quite a bit, very intelligently. Rollo Tomasi speaks about it intelligently. There are a lot of good people out there talking about this. Sadia Khan talks about it. Ryan Taraban in The Value of Others, his most recent book, talks a lot about this. You know, there is a tremendous body of work out there that talks about what they call the high heels effect, which is essentially that women like to date up. They don't date down. Men have a tendency economically to date down or equal, but they tend to more often date down. They like to find women who are in some way going to see them as a provider, a protector. That's something men enjoy. It's also something that many women enjoy, having a man who is a provider and protector. So essentially what this comes down to is when women are in a position that they are elevated professionally. So they get a raise at work, they get a promotion at work, they're now CEO of the company instead of CMO or whatever it might be. It gets harder for them to date up, because if you're already the CEO, that's as up as it gets. So you have to find someone who's a CEO of a better company than yours, or someone who's the CFO of a company that's much larger than yours. If you're Fortune 500, you got to find someone Fortune 50. Now, again, are these phenomenon locked in? No, of course. There's plenty of Fortune 500 CEO women who are probably dating like a musician who's not terribly successful, or an artist, or a school teacher. Jeff Bezos' ex-wife immediately or very quickly after their divorce married a school teacher. She thereafter divorced him. But ultimately, this is something that a lot of women, this is a documented phenomenon that a lot of women like to date up. And the higher up women get in the economic ladder, the harder it is for them to date up. And so therefore, it creates a likelihood of potential divorces. I've seen it happen many, many times in my office, where people come in, they were married to someone who's successful and in finance, they met in business school, and then the woman is ascending in her career and the man is either stagnating or declining or ascending at a slower pace. And the woman eventually sort of says, hey, look, you know what, you're not as ambitious as me. Or they start to feel sort of disappointed by this person failing to provide and protect at the same manner that they are, and they start to feel like they're carrying all the weight. So yeah, it creates tension in the marriage, and people very often that leads to divorce.
So we have kind of a harsh one here from the BBC. So very credible, but kind of harsh. Should you ever cut ties with your parents? From Miriam Frankel at the BBC. We have some very interesting stats here about a rise in parent estrangement.
Parent estrangement.
Studies show that
divorcing your parents.
I guess that's what it is. So 10 to 26% of young people, millennials, are experiencing strained relationships with fathers and mothers, citing divorce fallout, political or identity conflicts, and, quote, toxic behavior in older generations. It says here 40 to 60% of estrangements eventually heal, but we're seeing a rise in estrangements, and this is causing problems. The young kids are not there to provide in the old age. Parents are having to default on savings and retirement.
Yep.
What are we thinking here?
Yeah, I mean, look, we see this all the time. I think a divorce very often represents a rupture in a family dynamic, and it's not uncommon that a parent is aligned with the former daughter-in-law or son-in-law more so than their kids, or they're offended by the behavior of their son-in-law or daughter-in-law or their son or their daughter to the soon-to-be ex-spouse. You know, when your children marry and have children, their spouse becomes the mother of your grandchildren or the father of your grandchildren, as opposed to just being a son-in-law or daughter-in-law. So they become sort of part of your extended family. And a lot of grandparents, of course, take the position that having grandchildren is the reward for not killing your own children. And a lot of people will tell you how much they enjoy the role of grandparent as opposed to the role of parent, because it's a lot of the same nurturing and loving and caregiving and care receiving and love receiving without all of the responsibility and without, the feeling that you have such a massive amount of involvement in this child's life. So I haven't had the pleasure yet of finding out what that's like. Hint, hint.
Sorry,
but,
Dad.
it certainly is something I look forward to. Look, I think parental rupture from their children is a real thing. The other examples that are given in the article are things like people's political views or failure to accept lifestyles, a lot of which has to do with people coming out as LGBTQ+, and having a parent of a different generation who is not comfortable with that or who has difficulty absorbing that into their definition of their child. Again, my heart breaks for everybody in those situations on both sides of the fence, because I think, people very often do evil because they're evil. They just mistake it for happiness. They think that they're protecting their child from what they see as a poor life decision or a poor choice, when in fact, things like person's sexual orientation may not be a choice at all. It's an orientation. It's the way that you're born. So I think it's understandable that this stuff happens. Look, I think you only get one family. And I think it's really difficult sometimes to maintain ties to your family. The human capacity for friendship is probably God's way of apologizing for our family in some ways. But I do think you get one mother, one father, you get, your children, and that's what you get. And so I think you have a vested interest in trying, when there is rupture, to find avenues back to repair, because otherwise you're really losing an opportunity you're never going to get to have again. I'd like to think that people can grow, evolve, and transform into something different than the person who they are at any particular moment in their life. So again, sometimes a rupture is necessary on a temporary basis for people to see the importance of an issue to someone. Like in a divorce, very often people are estranged because the parents are so upset by what's going on in the divorce. But also I've seen a lot of people in divorce that really, really rely upon their parents, both emotionally and personally, in terms of getting involved in visitation and helping juggle the kids. And even economically, I've had a lot of people whose parents end up paying for their divorce. So it certainly is something that can be very difficult for a parent-child relationship. And it's also something that can be very supported by and bolstered by a good parent-child relationship.
Some people are saying that this might be a difference in culture. It seems
Sure.
One of the stats they note is that in America, we have a much larger rate of this than other countries.
Yeah.
And they're citing the sort of very quickly shifting, our culture shifts a lot faster than other places. And so they say there's a big divide between the baby boomers and their children, millennials, all that.
Yeah, it's become much more acceptable, I think, for people to not have as much involvement with their parents or grandparents. There was obviously a time in our society where people lived in these sort of clustered environments where, your parents, your grandparents, you might all live in the same home, even if it was a small home. And children then have the benefit of this intergenerational experience, and they have the influence of different generations. Look, every generation has its own way of viewing things and doing things. And I think that that's part of what makes, the fabric of a family and the fabric of a society interesting. You're supposed to, when you reach certain chapters in your life, realize, okay, that these chapters are not for me anymore. When I listen to, for example, contemporary music that's out there, I remind myself this isn't for me. So if I don't like the musical guest on SNL and I have no idea who they are, that's okay. They're not looking for a 50-something-year-old guy to know who this person is if everybody on TikTok knows who they are. So I think you have to sort of see your place in the tribal experience and the chain of succession of generations. And, having a family around you is a good way to do that. we have become increasingly stratified. We've become geographically, we're not as much tied to each other. We can do our jobs from almost anywhere. So it creates a lot of incentives for people to shift around and move geographically away from family members. But again, I think just like we're seeing a resurgence of other traditions in our society that we abandon, I think we're starting to see people try to tie a little bit closer to family, and maybe that will have some influence on the amounts of parental and child estrangements we're seeing in the future. Who knows? It's too soon to tell.
Better prepare a room for me then.
Fuck no. Absolutely not. No way. You can sleep in the lawn if you want to, but I'm calling the cops. All right, we got our viewer submission now at sextonshow.com. Remember to log on sextonshow.com and send us your love mail, your hate mail, your suggestions, anything. And if you're lucky, we might end up reading it for you. I mean, they read all of them and then they show me like, they get like 200 and they show me like 10. And then of the 10, we pick the one. So here's the one today. What's good, James? Love your stuff. My question is, do you think we underestimate just how much people can gaslight themselves? Over the years, I have come to believe that the majority of gaslighting people do is towards themselves, but you probably dealt with it far more than me, given you're a lawyer. Is it true? If this is true, do you have an idea as to why? Does this have something to do with our big egos? This is a great question. I don't think you're actually talking about gaslighting. So gaslighting, most people don't know this. It's become one of those terms that's being incredibly overused in our society. But the term gaslighting actually comes from a film called Gaslight, where a husband tries to convince his wife that she's gone insane. And the way that he does it is he keeps putting out the gaslight on the stove and then saying to her, no, it was lit. What are you talking about? So that's where the term comes from. So it comes from a pattern of behavior that's designed to make a person question their perception of reality and feel like they're going insane. What you're really referring to is self-delusion, which is, do people have a level of self-delusion? And people have always, to some degree, had a level of self-delusion. I think that a certain amount of healthy self-delusion is probably a good thing. It's part of having confidence, It's part of parenting, that you think your kid's the best looking or smartest or whatever. Self-delusion is part of a person's identity, perhaps. But the depth of that delusion, look, I think we are in an unprecedented time of people having irrationally high self-esteem, I'll call it, where people think that they are smarter, better, funnier, more talented, more interesting, especially that last one, more interesting than they actually are. Why? Because for the first time, everybody's in front of a fucking camera. Everyone's in front of a camera and has what they perceive to be an audience. I see people all the time online doing hey guys, a lot of you have been asking about what foundation No, we haven't. Who are you talking to? You have 77 followers and most of them are your family members. They're not asking about what foundation you use. Hey guys, a lot of you have been asking about what smoothie I like to drink. No one's actually asking that. But because there's a camera we've put in front of us, we think that there is an audience. And in fact, there is not an actual audience. Or if there is an audience, it's Russian bots. It's not real. So I think this is creating in people a delusional sense that they're very interesting because they're being recorded all the time by themselves, by others. They're documenting things. I think that it's understandable when every moment of our lives is being documented in some fashion by ourselves and by others, that we start to think that we're performing in some kind of a public performance, which again, day-to-day life was always a form of public performance. You walk outside your house and you're now performing for the audience of the world. But certainly the number of cameras that are pointed at us has now gone up all the time. In some ways, this is good. It causes people to behave in more civilized ways, maybe in the way that people used to carry guns. Now people are like, oh shit, somebody's going to record me if I have a meltdown in public, or if I start shouting at someone in a store, somebody's going to pull out a phone. And there have been a lot of public wrongs, really, that have been in some way accounted for because of the fact that there are so many cameras. But it's also created in people this very unhealthy sense of delusion and this sense that you are bigger and more interesting than you actually are. Again, what's important is that you're interesting to yourself and the people around you who you care about. Certainly, there's some economic aspect to this, that people want to be interesting to potential customers, potential employers. I understand that completely. But the sense that everything you are doing as some form of a performance, I am stunned walking around New York City where I live and work. How many people are taking pictures in front of damn near everything? Who are these pictures for? You are not a nationally known influencer. You are not. Do you send these to people? Do people actually want to look at it and go, oh, look, there you are in front of the vessel? It's not that interesting, especially if you live in New York. So again, do I think that that's gaslighting? No. But do I think people are gassed up on their own propaganda? 100%. And I think we're probably poor for it. We need to figure out a way to sort of get away from this and get out of our sense of self being the litmus test and the catalyst to everything that we do. So now it's time for Daily Sexton-ism. For those of you who might be new to the show, these are all sayings that I say so frequently to clients that my staff laughs whenever they hear me say them, and they seem to be convinced that these should be written into a book somewhere. Until that book comes out, you get this segment. Something that I say frequently: I'm not convinced that the best way to get the soda out of the bottle is to just keep shaking it. I think you should use, in any problem solving, the most efficient means, and you should use the minimum effective dose. People have a tendency to treat dandruff with decapitation. People have a tendency to think that the best way to get the soda out of the bottle is just to shake the bottle like crazy. But what does it do? It sprays the soda all around, you waste half the soda, and the truth is, in this metaphor, that very often taking the most traumatic, dramatic way of handling something is not the best way to do things. So in the future, when you're looking at a decision in your life, think about it. Is shaking the soda bottle the best way to get the soda out? Hey gang, that'll do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. Remember to hit like, subscribe, the notifications bell, all those good things that help our channel grow. I'll look forward to seeing you again on the next Better Call Sexton. Take care.